I, 32F, have been married to my husband John, 34M, for 4 years. We have a 1-year-old son together named Luke. Things have been going really well between us up until a few days ago. John works a typical 9-to-5 office job Monday through Friday. I am a stay-at-home mom taking care of Luke during the days. On Tuesday evening, John came home from work acting totally strange and different than his normal self. As soon as he walked in the door, he very sternly said we need to get a paternity test done for Luke. I was completely blindsided and had no idea why he would say that out of nowhere. I asked him why would we need to do that? Of course Luke is your son. John stayed stone-faced and firm, saying I am not asking, I am telling you we need to get one done immediately. I told him I refused to get one unless he explained to me why he suddenly felt this need to question whether Luke was his child. He wouldn't give me any reasons, he just kept demanding that I schedule a paternity test right away. I got upset and said after being together for over 4 years and bringing a child into this world, you are now questioning whether Luke is even yours? That is extremely hurtful for you to suggest and I am not going to just get a paternity test on a urge without an explanation. John started raising his voice, saying you're just going to have to get it done whether you want to or not. I'll be taking Luke to get one myself if you refuse. At this point, I was on the verge of tears from his outrageous behavior. I said you are acting completely crazy right now. If you have actual reasons to believe Luke isn't yours, then tell me. Otherwise, there is no way I am putting my son through an unnecessary medical procedure just because you are having some weird paranoid thoughts. John slammed his hand on the kitchen counter and shouted, why are you being so difficult about this? Just get the damn test. I shouted back, no. You need to explain yourself right now. We kept arguing back and forth, with John repeatedly demanding the paternity test and me refusing unless he gave me a real reason for needing one. Neither of us would back down. Finally, after about 30 minutes of this, John shouted fine, forget it, and stormed out of the house. He drove off in his car and didn't come back until after midnight. When he came back that late, I was already in bed but could hear him crashing around in the living room before going into the guest bedroom and slamming the door. The next day, John didn't say a word to me at all. He came home from work, ate dinner in silence, and spent the rest of the night on his computer and phone while sitting on the couch, avoiding me completely. I didn't bring up the paternity test issue since he clearly wasn't going to explain himself. Now it has been 3 days of this extremely cold and awkward tension between us. John isn't really speaking to me except when absolutely necessary about logistics with Luke. He has been sleeping in the guest room every night. I have no clue what sparked his sudden disturbed behavior about needing this paternity test. As far as I know, we have never had any issues in our relationship or reasons for him to be distrustful of me. This is putting a huge strain on our marriage obviously. I am at my wit's end with John giving me the silent treatment and still refusing to tell me what prompted his paternity suspicions in the first place. At the same time, I don't want to just cave and get the test done without knowing why he feels that way, as it would be admitting I did something wrong when I have no idea what that could even be. So Reddit, I'd here for not agreeing to get a paternity test for my son until my husband explains his reasoning first? Do I just get it over with to move past this despite him not communicating with me? Or is John being completely unreasonable and I have every right to demand answers before doing something so drastic? I am so confused by this entire situation and don't know what to do. Update 1. Thanks for all the responses on my original post about my husband John suddenly insisting we get a paternity test done for our 1-year-old son Luke. A lot has happened since I made that initial post just a few days ago, so I will try to explain everything that has unfolded. After a couple more days of John continuing to give me the silent treatment and not offering any explanation for his paternity test demand, I decided to reach out to his parents, my in-laws, for help. I figured they might be able to get through to him and find out what was going on. I called up my mother-in-law Sandra on Friday afternoon while John was still at work. As soon as I brought up the situation, she immediately responded, oh no, please tell me John isn't actually questioning if Luke is his. That's absolutely ridiculous. I explained how John had been adamant about getting a paternity test done over the past few days but refused to tell me why he felt that way. Sandra said she was completely shocked and had no idea what could have possibly made John think that. She said she would talk to her husband Bob, John's dad, right away, and that they would try to get to the bottom of what was making John act like this. Sandra seemed just as confused as I was about John's bizarre behavior. A couple hours later, I got a call from Bob. He said Sandra filled me in on what's happening with John insisting on this paternity test nonsense. I have to be honest, when she told me, my first thought was, oh Lord, what has that damn Tony been telling him this time? I was very confused, as I had no idea who this Tony person was that he mentioned. Bob could sense my confusion and explained Tony used to date you way back in college, right? Don't you remember him at all? I was very close to John's family since before we even started dating and told them about everything. The pieces started coming together when he said that. I instantly remembered my ex-boyfriend from freshman year of college named Tony. We had dated for about 6 months before realizing we wanted different things and just ended up going our separate ways amicably. I told Bob yes, I do remember Tony actually. but I haven't spoken to or seen him in over 10 years. What does he have to do with this paternity test situation with John? Bob responded, well, from what Sandra told me, it sounds like for some unexpected reason, Tony has been going around telling John some lies about you and him from back in college. We are assuming those lies are what made John start questioning if Luke is really his. I was absolutely blindsided and horrified. I never expected my ancient college ex to just resurface out of nowhere over a decade later and start spreading lies to my current husband about our son's paternity. I begged Bob to find out any more details he could about what exactly Tony had been telling John. He said he would press Sandra to get the full story from John so they could convince him to finally come clean with me about what this was all about. Sure enough, a little while later, Sandra called me back. She said she had gotten John to admit that Tony had recently been talking to him and planting seeds of doubt by claiming he had hooked up with me again, a year back, and that Luke could potentially be his son, not John's. I was absolutely in disbelief. Tony and I dated only for 6 months, and that too, back in 2009, and we definitely never hooked up in secret or anything even close to that behind each other's backs. The idea that my husband believed this random guy's lies from over 10 years ago instead of trusting me was making me incredibly upset and angry. As soon as John got home from work, I demanded we sit down so I could get to the bottom of this. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, your parents told me that piece of shit Tony has been going around telling you crazy lies about how Luke might be his son. Is that seriously why you have been acting like this and demanding a paternity test? John hesitantly nodded, but then muttered, well, when Tony told me all those details, it definitely seemed plausible that he could have hooked up with you again. I completely lost it at that point. I shouted, how could I possibly do that if I didn't do it in 10 years? The fact you're believing some bullshit lies from a guy I hadn't seen or spoken to in a literal decade over just simply trusting your own wife is unbelievably ridiculous. John tried acting defensive, saying you can't blame me for having doubts when Tony brought up all this stuff I never knew about. I fired back, what exactly did Tony even tell you? He's obviously making it all up to try to mess with our marriage, so I need to know the details of his pathetic lies. John then proceeded to claim that Tony had given him very specific details, like silly nicknames we apparently called each other. Describing some jewelry I supposedly wore all the time that he had gotten me. Mentioning some random personal habits or quirks I had at the time. Stating we had again dated for about 6 months before things happened, aka him implying we hooked up and that Luke could be his based on the timing. As John was rambling through all of these made-up details, I just shook my head in disbelief. Barely any of it was accurate or even close to how Tony and my relationship actually was. He was so clearly fabricating and exaggerating things to make it seem more believable to John that something sketchy happened between Tony and I while we were dating. I looked John dead in the eyes and said, I'm not going to sit here and get drilled over obvious lies this Tony guy is making up about us for whatever sick reasons he has. We dated briefly in 2009, yes, but I never cheated or did anything romantic with him after we broke up. And now over 10 years later, he's suddenly popping up trying to convince my husband that our son isn't even yours? It's insane. John mumbled, well, some of the things he was saying seemed pretty specific, so I didn't know what to think. I cut him off and continued yelling, none of what he told you was real. I can't believe you took some random person's word over mine about something as huge as Luke's paternity. Do you honestly think I would lie about having a secret love child with an ex from over 10 years ago? The fact you've been giving me this cold silent treatment for days and demanding a paternity test because you believe Tony's obvious bullshit is just, I can't even put into words how hurt and disrespected I feel right now. At that point, tears were streaming down my face. John tried to hug me, but I shoved him away. He said, I'm sorry, you're right. I never should have bought into Tony's lies without even giving you a chance to explain or defend yourself first. When he was telling me all that stuff, it did sound plausible since I never knew about him before. But you're my wife and the mother of my child, I never should have doubted that. I told John I need some space from you right now. I can't even look at you after you directly accused me of cheating on you and having another man's child, all because you listened to a jealous ex trying to ruin our marriage for whatever pathetic reasons. With that, I grabbed my car keys and stormed out of the house, driving off to go stay at my in-laws' place for the night. The next day, I decided I was going to put this whole situation behind me and move forward, under one condition, that John stop speaking to Tony altogether, and agree to cut him out of his life completely for pulling that ridiculous stunt. If not, I told John the first would be seeking a separation. Update 2. After the big blow-up fight I had with John over believing the bogus lies from my ex Tony about cheating and having another man's child, I spent the next few days really expecting what to do about our marriage situation. Part of me was still so angry, hurt, and distrustful after John directly accused me of being unfaithful and questioning if Luke was even his biological son, just because Tony fed him those obvious fabrications. However, I also had to consider the fact that John and I do have a decade of history together, and one terrible lapse in judgment doesn't necessarily erase all the years of love and commitment we've shared as partners. Not to mention the family we've created by having Luke together. I knew John had already been beaten down by the guilt over letting Tony's stories get into his head and him treating me so poorly those few days after initially demanding the paternity test. I decided that if he was willing to take full accountability for his mistake and promise to never doubt Luke's paternity again, I would be open to attempting to move past this and rebuild the trust in our relationship. So, I initiated a sincere heart-to-heart conversation with John. I started by saying what you allowed to happen with believing Tony's lies and accusing me of carrying another man's child has put us in possibly the rockiest point of our marriage so far. I need you to understand the severity of how deeply you've hurt me. John said, I know, and words can't describe how sorry I am for ever letting myself think you were capable of being unfaithful or flat out lying about Luke's paternity. It was unforgivable for me to treat you like that. I replied, damn right it was unforgivable. My trust has been completely shaken after this. So I need to know, is there even a shred of doubt left in your mind about Luke being your biological son? Because if so, I don't see how we can move forward at all as a couple. John shook his head adamantly. No, I don't have any doubts left at all. Deep down, even when Tony was filling my head with those stories, I knew you would never actually do that to me. I let my insecurities get the best of me for a few days, but you are the love of my life. Luke is my son, without a doubt. I told him that if he truly felt that way and understood how devastatingly he had wounded my trust in him by allowing an ex from over 10 years ago to manipulate him into questioning our son's paternity, then I was willing to try moving past this. But if you ever accuse me of something like that again or doubt Luke's paternity even one more time, we're done. I'll take my son and he would never see either of us again. John readily agreed, I understand, and you have my word that nothing like this will ever happen again. Thank you for giving me one last chance to make this right. Over the next couple of weeks, I could see John was truly remorseful in being the loving, devoted husband and father that he had been for the last few years before this Tony drama unfolded. However, I also noticed he still seemed a bit down and preoccupied at times. Finally, one night after putting Luke to bed, I decided I was just going to bite the bullet and get the paternity test done. I still had absolutely no doubts in my mind about John being the father. But I could see that little seed of uncertainty that Tony planted was still weighing on my husband's mind, even if he wasn't outright saying it. So, I sat John down and said, I know you've apologized about 1,000,000 times for the whole paternity test situation and said you have no doubts about Luke being yours. But I can't help but notice you still seem a bit, I don't know, just not your usual 100% happiest self lately. So for your peace of mind, and to prove to you once and for all, I've decided we're going to go ahead and get that paternity test done for Luke. John's eyes widened in surprise. Wait, really? Are you sure? I don't need you to do that at all. I shouldn't have even brought up the idea of questioning his paternity in the first place, I know that now. I shook my head. No, it needs to be done, if only so you can stop letting what Tony said linger in the back of your mind and regain 100% confidence. If the test shows what I already know, that Luke is yours, then we can completely put this behind us once and for all. Consider it an easy way for me to help relieve you of any last shred of doubt. The very next day, I went ahead and made an appointment for all three of us to get a proper paternity test done at a reputable lab. John and I both got our mouths swabbed, as did Luke. I paid the expensive fees to get an expedited test result back within 48 hours. Sure enough, 2 days later, the lab contacted me to confirm that John's DNA 100% male paternity matched Luke's DNA. He was definitively Luke's biological father, just as I had insisted all along. When I showed John the test results, he had a huge smile and looked like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. We embraced and he thanked me again for going through the process, even though I had never doubted Luke was his son. I told John, okay, this needs to be the final chapter of this ridiculous book. We're going to go see Tony face to face, show him these test results, and make it loud and clear that he's to never insert himself into our family's life again, or else there will be serious legal consequences. John agreed it was the right thing to do, so the very next day we got a babysitter to watch Luke, then drove over to the apartment complex I knew Tony lived at. I had looked up his address online after he stupidly listed his full name and number in the messages he sent to John. When Tony opened his door and saw both John and I standing there, he actually looked nervous. John spoke first, holding up the test results paperwork. Tony, we just wanted you to see these paternity test results that prove, without a doubt, that I am Luke's biological father. All the bullshit stories you fed me about hooking up with my wife were complete lies. Tony was speechless. Before he could say anything or mutter any of his excuse, I stepped forward, furious, and shouted, "Don't dare play dumb, you snake. You knew exactly what you were trying to do by fabricating lies about us dating and me cheating to have another man's kid behind John's back. I don't know if you were just trying to get revenge over me for some sad reason, or if your aim was to sabotage my marriage, but either way, your pathetic stunt failed." Tony still tried to lie, saying, "I swear, I didn't make anything up. We did date and you did have a habit of." I cut him off, yelling, "Save it. I don't care what you tell yourself. You're obviously just a sick, miserable person if you felt the need to reach out to my husband over 10 years after we dated for just a few months in college and make up insane cheating accusations. Well, congratulations, you succeeded in briefly making him doubt our relationship, but in the end, the truth came out." John then chimed in, stern-faced. "You're going to stay far away from me, my wife, and my son from now on. If I ever find out you've tried contacting her or me again, or if you keep spreading lies, I won't hesitate to take legal action against you for harassment and defamation." Tony's attempt at an innocent face dropped, and he said in a rude tone, "Yeah, whatever, like you two would actually do anything." I fired back instantly, furious at his dismissive attitude. "Try me, you piece of garbage. I have all the text messages and voicemails you left for my husband saved, and they make it clear you were intentionally trying to break up our marriage with lies. I'll have plenty of evidence to get a restraining order against you if you don't stay out of our lives for good." With that, I spoke in a low, threatening tone. "Listen up, Tony. This is me giving you a chance to slink away and disappear from mine and John's lives forever, having failed at your sad attempt to sabotage us with your desperate lies. If you ever try contacting me, him, or coming around my son again, I'll make sure you end up behind bars for a very long time, you got it?" Tony held up his hands defensively and said, Okay, damn. You've made your point. I'll leave you two alone, shit." As we turned to walk away, I looked back and said one last thing to Tony. "Get some serious professional help for whatever issues made you think it was okay to mess with an old friend's marriage and family life like this, all for your own petty jealousy or vengeance or whatever sad reason. You're lucky my husband loves me enough to actually consider believing your pathetic lies, because a lot of guys would have just automatically decked you on the spot. Do everyone a favor and stay single, since even an ex from 10 years ago is too recent for you to get over. Now get lost and don't let me see your face again." With that, I turned and walked away. John had a proud smile on his face as we got in the car. "Thank you for standing up to that loser like that and putting him in his place," he said. "I can't believe I temporarily let myself fall for his idiotic lies and the drama they caused us. But dealing with him face to face and having the definitive proof of the test results has closed that chapter for good. It's just us and Luke now, like it should be." I was relieved this Tony debacle was finally behind us.